tonight we're talking about should cannabis be legalized in Africa? Of course, we know some countries have actually legalized it, but on the grounds of medicinal purposes as also other purposes. So I'll just go straight and introduce my panel tonight. We have Buddha Blaze there, who is one of the key lead of the hemp cooperative farmers of Kenya, industrial hemp that is, and he's with us today to help us understand all matters about legalization of cannabis in Africa. And of course, we have Claire Bosire, who is a counseling psychologist, here to tell us exactly when we talk about medicinal purposes of cannabis, what are we looking at? And of course, also we have Velma Kiome, who is a very, very keen proponent of decriminalization of marijuana cannabis for medicinal purposes, very vocal about that. And of course, we need to look at the legal perspective of this whole conversation. And we have Okale Makanda, who is an advocate here to help us understand the legal implications as far as issues to do with the legalization of cannabis is concerned in Africa. Thank you so much, guys. Happy to see all of you again. Remember, this is not just a discussion for myself and the speakers we have, but of course, it's a discussion that is open for everyone to just chip in and tell us your thoughts. I won't forget to, of course, introduce my co-host. I see you there, Maria. I'm happy to see you, Maria. Maria Sarungi is one of the key hosts of this weekly program that airs on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and she's usually here to co-host with me. I know she will be saying one or two words as soon as she is able to, as soon as her microphone is enabled, but I know that will happen soon. So, welcome again. I'll just begin with you, Buddha Blaze, just to hear from you, your perspective, the legalization of cannabis in Africa. What do you think about this, Buddha Blaze? I see Buddha Blaze is at a speak up. Let's hope that can be fixed, but we'll just jump straight to Maria and just hear a few words from you, Maria, about today's topic as we get our speakers started off. Maria, what are your thoughts about today's discussion? We're long over a couple of times, but here at Mwanzo, we had to have this conversation. What do you think about it?
Definitely, this is a very important conversation. And I think the more as the world starts opening up to other ideas and to other thoughts with regard basically to cannabis as being beyond a psychotropic drug, I think that with the more discoveries, people will get more open. But I also believe that the continent is a little conservative in that sense. So there's still a lot of people who believe that it's a psychotropic drug and it should just be banned. So this will be a very interesting conversation, and I really hope to get a lot of people chip in. We had people, some of the people commenting from Tanzania who were just delighted, and they were like, oh, isn't it supposed to be legal everywhere? So there also are those who are very conservative and think that this is a big no-no and should not be allowed. So let's hear all the sides, and we hope to get as much as possible diverse views so we can, in the end, be able to make up our minds.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. I know we're trying to just figure out a little bit about how to get Buddha Blaze and the rest of the speakers, Claire and Velma, to become speakers. I know Buddha Blaze, if you can just check your DMs, I'm sure you'll find the request there, just requesting you and Claire and Velma to accept an invitation to be speakers, and my producer is working tirelessly to just make sure she assists you with that. But we'll just go straight to Makanda. I know the legal aspect of the legalization of cannabis in Africa has been a long hard conversation. We've been talking about it for a while, but what would you say is perhaps the key legal issue when it comes to the legalization of cannabis in Africa?
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for having me on this Kenya, obviously, described as a narcotics or psychotropic drug under the Narcotics and Psychotropic Drugs Act. And obviously, usage or transporting or selling of cannabis is outlawed in Kenya, unless, of course, you can show that it was for personal use. In which case, the penalty is 10 years, which is less than if you are using it for trade, which is 20 years. So in Kenya, as it is right now, the law outlaws cannabis either for personal use, for recreational use, for medical use, or even for trade. And I think the background to this is because most of these drug laws in Kenya, especially related to cannabis, was inherited from the colonial governments. And the Kenyan governments have not, or the African governments have struggled to move on into the modern view regarding especially cannabis. And if you combine that with religion, that has stalled any discussions around allowing cannabis to be legalized in Africa, most of Africa, and Kenya being one of them.
Well, thank you so much, Makanda. I know the conversation has also touched on, and over the years, it's touched on issues of addiction, issues of abuse. I know you're talking about the difficulties in Kenya alone, but when you give it an African perspective, what really are the core issues across the continent as far as the legalization is concerned?
I think obviously I don't know whether I have enough medical information to know whether it's as addictive as other drugs, because there has been conversation on how lethal cannabis is, and whether it is as addictive, let's say, as cigarettes, as alcohol, or whether the benefits outweigh the risks of addiction. And obviously, because of laws that are prohibitive, it's become very hard to do proper investigations or to have proper reports, even published, that are supported by government towards understanding whether we should legalize it for medical reasons, how to control addiction, and this generally is a problem regarding issues of addiction in Africa, where sometimes the government don't like talking about it, and even family levels, and as such prohibits even just discussions around legalization or even managing how it's consumed.
All right, thank you so much, Makanda. I know we're having a bit of a challenge just having our speakers on. For Buddha Blaze, I don't know if you can see a tab where you can actually just see a speaker to see that. Also Claire, Bosire, and of course Velma as well. If you can just check your DMs, I'm sure you'll be able to see some there and allow you to speak. Makanda, I do understand, there's the legal perspective, and that's why we also have Claire here today. And I'm really hoping that she will be able to get on and just become a speaker and be able to give her views. But I just want to throw it to you, Maria. This is a discussion we've been having. We've seen even Kenya here. It's not been an easy journey, but for Morocco and other countries, they've not had it, too difficult to legalize cannabis. I don't know what you think about this, Maria, in terms of the journey and just the perspective that maybe governments have towards the use of cannabis.
Well, I think actually, when I try to take a quick look at this, I think that we also have something that maybe could be an interesting entry point. And I would like to, in that case, ask Makanda whether he thinks that the fact that today we have I think it's called cut being legal in some African countries, and it's not legal in other African countries. What does that mean? How did it start?
Yeah, I think the issue about generally so-called drugs is very erratic, and I think sometimes it depends on the political power of the farming community. Sometimes, like for instance, the cat farmers in Kenya form quite a significant economic block in terms of the revenues they make, and as such, I think they are able to exert proper political effect on the government. And every time in Kenya any country goes out to ban cat, we've seen the Kenyan government at very high levels engaging with the countries that consume cat. Strange enough, Kenya might not be the highest consumer of cat, even though it could be one of the highest producers. So the Kenyan government at very high levels, I've seen a news item as late as 2 days ago about the president engaging the Somali government about lifting of the ban on cat. And so I think historically, where the cat is farmed is a very engaged community. They have a lot of economic power. They are very politically engaged. So for me, I think it's more of an isolated case of the economic power of the community or the people that are funding it, rather than as any clear governmental policy on the liberalization of tax. I don't think that there is any government effort to ensure that tax is farmed and what are the regulations and how it's consumed. Especially when I look back here at home, it's more of the pressure from the community rather than the pressure from the or government willingness to necessarily support it.
At the same time, just for the sake of argument, actually, Makanda, and actually there are facts backing it up. What has happened is we have seen that cut per se has become very lucrative for countries like Ethiopia and, as you mentioned, also for Kenya in Africa, whereby, and I think also Uganda, if I'm not mistaken, whereby actually it brings in a lot of foreign exchange. Now, the question or the argument using the example of cut has been that cannabis can be just as profitable. As we see, people are ready to pay quite a high amount of money or, per unit for cannabis, and I'm not really an expert in that area, but I do see people saying that there's quite a high amount of income that could also become a good revenue or foreign exchange for some of the countries if they would legalize it, especially if they legalize it as a form of agriculture. So the same way like cut in some of the countries, as you pointed out, even in Kenya, it's not necessarily consumed, but it is a major export. What's your thought about that? And also, if I may ask, Makanda, there's been a request from some people I'm seeing here in the back end, if you can move your microphone a bit closer so they can hear you more. That was the only request I saw, and I'm sorry, I'm just seeing some of the messages coming in.
Sorry about that. I hope they can hear me.
This is good. Yeah, good
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Okay. So I get that demand, especially by for liberalization of cannabis in Africa. But the challenge, as I've said, I don't see it as a concerted effort by serious pressure groups. It is, for me, it feels like more of a sporadic movement. In Kenya right now, it's there because one of the, rank outsiders, if I might say, in the political scene, has come and said that that is one of the things he will do if he's elected as the president. And now it is the conversation in Nairobi. But I don't think that it's a conversation that has been picked up by different stakeholders, especially, let's say, at the legislative level, to engage with the public or with the pressure groups that are, pushing for this. And as such, there hasn't been too much, conversations, I suspect, regarding what the economic value will be, and whether countries, need to move to the next stage. And I feel like in the countries where this has been liberalized, in the West, and I think South Africa and other countries, there have been stronger discussions by a credible number of citizens to the level where the government and legislative organs are willing to start having conversations calling in experts and trying to have that discussion, on whether we should move this to the next level or not. I just feel like the stakeholders, especially around government, have avoided this conversation and haven't pushed to have it discussed liberally. And of course, there's enforcement also mechanisms that are going on. The police are still very strict on the issues of cannabis. There are laws in the books in countries in Africa which are prohibitory, but the police no longer, like laws around prostitution. You will not see the police, spending too much time on them. But they're still quite keen, on enforcing, cannabis, even though I understand the medical effects to the general consumers is not as bad or maybe worse than that of cigarettes. But there isn't sufficient conversation around it between government, especially parliament, and the people who are advocating for the criminalization of cannabis and mainly also for health purposes.
Yes, thanks so much. And Leah, I do see that we do have Velma, right? Velma, are you on? Can you switch on your mic?
Yes, I'm on.
Oh, wonderful.
I just wanted
Welcome.
to
Yes.
thank you. This is Velma Kiome from Nairobi. Something Makanda just said, and I joined this discussion because I'm aware that the late Honorable Kenneth Okoth, MP for Kibra, had actually been working on a draft bill which he shared with me as a stakeholder. I actually requested him to share it with me, and I wanted to see what it said. And this bill was actually entering from this draft bill, 2018, was titled the Marijuana Control Bill 2018, and it was entering from a point of regulation right from the jump. So the idea, its purpose or its objects were 6. 1, to provide for the regulation of the growth and use of marijuana, to provide for a registration system for marijuana growers and users, to ensure a licensing system for marijuana growers and users, to legalize the growing and use of marijuana, to promote public awareness about the growth and use of marijuana, and to promote the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes. So there has been a push, and it's, in my view, this was a very mature push. It didn't need any stakeholders, any interest groups. It was directly from a member of parliament who himself had suffered an illness. We are all, the Kenyans are aware that he died of colon cancer, which he had been battling for some years. And by the time he was getting the necessary treatment, it was so advanced that all he could take now was marijuana products to ease the pain and the discomfort of chemotherapy. So he benefited from it towards his end, and he knew and understood what value it would for medicinal purposes. And I argued with him multiple times, especially after I read his draft bill. I told him the bill should also talk about decriminalization. Now, there's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. We talk a lot about legalization. Now, legalization would mean that one may possess or use the drug according to guidelines and limitations that have been set through governance, like such a bill or a bill different to this one. And typically, those guidelines would be codified by that state. They would decide what it would mean. And legalization would mean individuals using marijuana are allowed under that law, that country's law, to possess it, but may not face any criminal charges because they'll not be engaging in any illegal activity. But decriminalization, as much as when we talk about decriminalization, we're talking about two things. We're talking about the past and the present and going forward. And we're talking about the individual possessing or using marijuana being subject to punishment in the form of a fine rather than jail time. And that would mean also the people who retrospectively, would have to go back into the past and say the people who've been jailed for possession and distribution would also be freed from jail. And then those are the people then, and I remember I told him, you must have a clause in the interim for amnesty for all those people who've been jailed in the past. First, have decriminalization in the bill so that they can be freed, and they can be the first people to benefit from this law, when it becomes law. So you need to find a way to make sure that is there. Yeah, so for me, decriminalization is a very, very important part of the whole legalization discussion, because it's separate, it's different from legalization. So just to correct Council Makanda there, that we already had a very mature level within Kenya for a bill. We had got to the point of a draft bill. So we didn't need to start from that nascent level of interest groups clamoring and pushing for anything. We were already quite advanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Velma. And really, that's like an exceptional insight, considering that for many African countries, even just the discussion itself exudes a lot of, righteousness and outrage from members of parliament who would be passing these kind of laws. And it does seem that, as you pointed out correctly, that this may have come from the late Honorable Ken Okoth's personal experience. That sort of made it clear to him that there was an importance in ensuring that, as you pointed out, it's decriminalized. But just getting there, how was the reception? So you did talk about the fact that it was introduced, but how was that received by his colleagues? What made it not go through, or what made it not being part of the legislation today? Do you have any insights, Velma?
I don't have any insights other than that it was slowed down by his illness, by his untimely illness and then eventual death. I don't see why, as a member of parliament, bringing a bill like this to debate in the House would not be seen in a negative light, because that's what parliament is for. As long as we were helping him in the background to make a solid case and a solid argument for it. So what he was looking at was the setup of a council, a marijuana control council that would be established under Section 4. And that the marijuana council would now be the one setting all this, but it was very focused on the oil, the resin, the cannabis plant. And I also challenged him to go into looking at hemp as well, because there's not just the medicinal purpose, there's also an industrial purpose for cannabis. So if you drive, for instance, if anybody on this panel drives on this list, this space drives a high-end vehicle, a Mercedes-Benz, BMW, McLaren, any of these major high-end sedans, you will find that the interior is actually decked out with a very highly polished wood-like looking material. That is actually hemp, compacted hemp that's been coated and is very durable, very long-lasting, very resilient. It's used even in construction in some countries to build very durable houses. So there's other levels, and I remember he talked about, when we discussed it. He said first he wants to start the medicinal way and make a case for that and set up the council to regulate it, and then we can move into hemp for industrial purposes, making paper. We wouldn't be talking about expensive toilet paper and all these things in Kenya. We'd be manufacturing our own very affordable paper and other materials as well, maybe even exporting all these car parts. So he tried. It never got to the point where it was debated in the House, so there was no negative perception in the House. There was negative perception in the public sphere, and you had all these exchanges of people saying, I remember I had an exchange with a former member of parliament, Bill Okero, who said, oh, it's bad for your health or something like that. And I told him, no, you need to look a little more into THC, the oils, the cannabis oils, and how they help people with various illnesses. But then again, somebody else, I think it was Maria, she mentioned about, or Mr. Makanda perhaps, he mentioned adverse effects of marijuana. Yes, all substances can have adverse effects. I'm not an absolute expert about it, but I've done my research based on the work that we were doing with Honorable Kenneth Okoth, I did my research and I found that, in fact, it can affect marijuana use for smoking and smoking mainly can affect teenage brains. They're not mature. Many things can affect teenage brains. And so it's not recommended for use for persons before age 21. So it must be regulated. But then the oils, I know the oils in other countries. I remember seeing a story from the UK where a parent was arguing for the use of cannabis oil for a child who had multiple seizures a day. And the cannabis oil was actually helping this child have fewer seizures and be able to function like a normal healthy child with fewer interruptions in their day. So there's different ways. How you use it can affect, how and when you use it can affect your health. Let's not even kid about that, because we know the same for tobacco. But I'd also like to remind people who are opponents of marijuana. When we look back at the history of why marijuana was criminalized, you find the church is mentioned. You find that the mainly Black communities who are traditionally using it wherever they were, whether in the US, in South America, or in Africa, were using it already as part of their own traditional medicine or recreation even. And it was seen as something religiously deviant, so to speak, because a lot of cultural things were seen as deviant. And then you had another level where now the elite wanted to control medicine. And so they decided natural medicine was no longer a good tool for healing and for cures, even though it was proven. I mean, the South Americans were using it. African Americans had brought it across the oceans over many years before and were continuing to use it for various ailments. And then you have now these people wanting to control how medicine is administered and taught. And so they then eliminate the use of natural cures. And that's where marijuana kind of was thrown out with the baby and the bathwater, so to speak. So it was basically out of controlling industry and the medical field, right from training into the pharmaceutical, and enter the big pharmaceutical that has its patented drugs, so nobody can produce the same drugs and make a living out of that. Only they can. So there's a lot to look at. And then you have another level now, at the grower level. Marijuana is a plant or a natural, God-provided plant that can grow almost anywhere. You drop the seed in a crack in the pavement, it will grow. It doesn't require so much input. It doesn't require fertilizers, control of the soil, and a lot of mini controls in it like tobacco does. And so again, there enters the people who want to then provide fertilizers don't have a place, they won't have their position in the market in that space, the grower space. So now regulation brings in all those things. Those people won't feel shortchanged. They can still bring in fertilizer. If we say there has to be a standard because it's now a cash crop and it must be tended this way, there must be certain spacing between the plants and that kind of thing, then you have that kind of regulation at that level, from the grower level to the seller to the distributor level. Then everybody can have their space. So in that sense, that is why Honorable Kenneth Okoth started with regulation and the council, so that then all those things can be catered for and nobody feels shortchanged.
Thank you so much, Velma. Now we'll be getting back to you. And Murithi Wamwangi, I see you.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Okay. So personally, I would like to say we should look into it, not basically as profits and all that, because I don't think that should be the biggest point. The biggest point is we should not try and justify the fact that we want to smoke, or the persons that want to smoke. So we should actually be looking at it as the effects. If we allow it, what type of negative effects will it have on Africa? because we can't just go copying everything that the states are doing, because they legalized it and it was illegal in our place. Now that they want to legalize it, we're trying to legalize it in all our African countries. I think the main point that we should be actually legalizing is after we find out the effects, and it will also help these problems of having to smoke weed that is laced with other things. At least when it is legalized, you can actually go to a shop and buy the stuff, like you're going to buy bread and you have variety. You want white bread or brown bread, you get to have that variety, and it's the right thing, not something that somebody just planted there and it's brought to you, or it's mixed with something, as it's in other cases. That's my submission.
Thank you so much. Leah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Such a great conversation we're having here. Velma, thank you so much, Makanda, Maria, and everyone who's been, giving their views. I do hear Velma talking very passionately about why cannabis needs to be legalized in Africa. And I'm happy Claire is here to give us, the health perspective of the use. But the first question for Claire would be from me is, Claire, why do you think that, yes, there's the aspect of, the argument of it has medicinal purposes that can be beneficial to one's health, but then yet you find governments are still opposed to legalizing it? Claire, would you maybe be able to tell us what your thoughts are, perhaps why the legalization is still holding, weight as far as, the risks of the use of cannabis is concerned? Claire.
Thank you, Leah. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Good evening. Yes, good evening.
Thank you.
I can hear you.
I'm glad I'm finally here. It's been a bit of a hassle trying to have me connected, especially on that I will be a speaker. So, a question of should cannabis be legalized or not, and why is it taking long to be legalized, and so on. Maybe the first thing that I'd like to point out is that for the longest, cannabis has been classified under Schedule 1. When we talk about classification of drugs, especially the psychoactive substances, cannabis has been legalized under Schedule 1. What does that mean? Basically, that at the time, there was no currently acceptable medical use for the same. It was there was no demonstrated safety profile for the same. It had very high potential for abuse, and it was considered a danger due to the potential severity of the psychological or the physical dependence that it creates. Now, that has since changed because over the years, there has been a number of studies conducted that have been able to demonstrate the medicinal use for the same. Maybe to break it down a bit, cannabis has two major components that are known. There is THC, which is the psychoactive component of cannabis, and there is the CBD or cannabidiol, which is now the one that has got a medicinal value for the same. And that has been seen to manage pain or help in managing pain. It has also been seen to treat pediatric epilepsy, intracerebral pediatric epilepsy. Is also been seen to manage or help in treating multiple sclerosis, also anxiety, psychosis, and also correcting some of the structural alterations that CHT could cause in the brain. But that is CBD. That's the component. The challenge we are having, however, is that over time also, because you see, marijuana has two main known purposes. There is recreation and there is the medicinal use. Over time, the recreational use has become very popular, and the potency of the same has actually increased. just like any other crops that we may be having. This particular one has been, should I say, it has evolved. There has been a lot of hybrids produced that has seen the THC level in marijuana increase up to 200%, where traditionally mostly was around 4%. Now we are talking about around 12% in a majority of the variants that are available. So due to that, it has a high risk of abuse, very, very high risk of abuse, and the potency of the same has increased because many people seek out this particular substance for the recreational purpose, and if they're seeking it for the recreation purpose, then THC is implicated in a big way. So, and we can see that again in our country, very high levels of abuse for this same substance, and it becomes very risky for individuals who are beginning to use this substance at a young age, especially during the adolescent years. So the big question when it comes to should we legalize it or should we not legalize it, I think that is subject to many things. Number one, do we have capacity to separate THC or to sort of get rid of the THC so that we are able to remain with a component that is medicinal? And with what I have just said, the amount of or the content of THC has been seen to increase or to be increased in the recent past. So if we have to legalize it, then we have to have capacity to control. Because yes, it is true there is a medicinal value to it, but do we have a capacity to regulate or to control? Secondly, do we have capacity and the mechanism to be able to extract the THC, which is the psychoactive component, so that we are able to remain with the cannabidiol as a component? I think those are the things that would make it a little difficult. And in my opinion, I'd say also a bit dangerous for us to be able to legalize it at this particular point in our country and in the continent, because again, if we consider the population that uses these substances currently, the population is largely the younger people. So it's likely to be very, very risky for them unless they can prove that we have the mechanism to be able to control and to be able to regulate.
All right. Thank you so much, Claire. I see Velma has something she'd like to say, I think, about your comments. Velma, go ahead. Before we come to Buddha Blaze, who I'm very happy to see with us today.
Yes, so just to respond to Claire's concerns, which are very valid concerns, that's one of the functions of the Marijuana Control Bill 2018. Now, I didn't get to the part where I talk about the functions of the council. The functions of the council, the first two obviously are regulation of growth and use, and then registration of marijuana growers and users, and licensing, the third one. The other three are to develop awareness programs on the growth of marijuana, and advise national and county governments on matters relating to marijuana. And then the final and sixth one is to undertake research and policy development on growth and use of marijuana. Now, under that last one, that's where now experts would come in. Experts like a board that would consist of persons appointed by the Cabinet Secretary for Health, a chairperson, a principal secretary, people from the Marijuana Planters Association, people from the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board, people from the National Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Use, this is NACADA, Kenya Medical Research Institute, this is KEMRI, Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, KARI, Law Society of Kenya, this is Makanda and his colleagues, the Chief Executive Officer who would now be an ex-official member, the Attorney General, of course, representing the ex-official as an ex-official member. So you see, those experts, KARI, KEMRI, Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board, where Claire and her colleagues would actually come into play to help inform the policy around the plant itself, its properties, and how to make it safely available.
All right, thank you, Velma. Happy to see you here, Buddha Blaze. I don't know what I'd really first of all like to hear from you, Buddha Blaze, just about the legalization of cannabis in Africa. What are your thoughts around this before we jump into all these other things we'd like to talk about?
Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for this opportunity. I see very well versed people in this subject. And just thank you for this opportunity. It's great to see that Kenya is getting to this point where we can actually discuss this, at least openly, which wasn't the case like a few years ago. I myself have had a few webinars. I run a school called, I represent a school called Chiba Academy, which is a cannabis academy based out of South Africa. And we'll be opening a campus here in Kenya very soon. So you guys definitely reach out to me to be able to get some of you guys to study the growth of cannabis and hemp and all that. But more importantly, I'm also the communications secretary for Industrial Hemp Farmers Cooperative of Kenya, which is something that we have launched this year. And I'm so glad to have this conversation, to see people coming out and understanding that cannabis is not just really what it's been demonized to be, but it's a plant with millions and millions of uses, different uses, whether it's medicine, whether it's building materials, whether it's textiles. And in a country like Kenya that's really suffering from lack of jobs, we really need to take a different approach as far as understanding the plant. So as much as everybody else is going on about legalization, I think where we need to start is research, understanding the crop that we're dealing with, because that's where it begins. We have to understand the crop that we're dealing with, which has powerful uses, from food to medicine to many, many different things. So I think we need to start there from the research perspective. So it's not really just to go out and say legalize, without the authorities understanding what type of crop that we're dealing with. This is a power crop. It's a crop that was given to us by God. It's a crop that can be used for many different aspects. And I understand the abuse part, and of course, legislation needs to really be put in. And all the countries that I've been to around the world that have legalized have taken years and years and years of research. So it takes research. It's not just about coming and saying legalize, because what if it ends up in the wrong hands? Countries like Netherlands, which legalized way ahead, has really done a good job at keeping away cannabis from the hands of young children. So law enforcement is a big deal. Of course, sensitization, making people understand what it is, so that you can actually start the legalization process when you know that the country is in safe hands. You don't want to just legalize and then people are going out there and abusing the crop and using it for different reasons that are not meant to be used, and therefore you're not really going to win this war. So you have to really understand, and the language that we are talking to the authorities, whether it's senators or MPs, is to start from research. I was in Jamaica in 2015 when they legalized at the University of West Indies, and one of the biggest things that they really, really focused on was research for medicinal purposes. As much as it's widely used in Jamaica, it was only legal in 2015 when the Prime Minister understood and the government understood that there's more to research than just the plant and smoking and recreation use. So that's my little 2 cents just to begin with, that we can continue from there.
Thank you for those comments. I would like to hear from Makanda, because like Buddha Blaze says, it is possible for us to legalize and perhaps set in parameters that inform the use and where whose hands the product gets into. But really, Makanda, do you think there's really a way we can, as a continent, not just Kenya, Uganda, be it Tanzania, just generally as African countries, do you think there are systems that could possibly, be put in place that can ensure that the product does not get into wrong hands? Because I think that is the key issue for authorities. I mean, how far can the security be that, you know, it ensures that the product does not get into the wrong hands? Is there a possibility that this can actually become a reality, Makanda?
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, I think it is possible to regulate, and I would like to give a good example. In Kenya, when I was growing up, when I was much younger, you know, cigarette usage was in public spaces was a very common feature. You will find people in almost smoking in every place, and I have to say that for a country like Kenya has done a fantastic job in protecting public spaces and generally just the sale of cigarettes. Of course, there are a few breaches here and there, but I think it's been managed quite well. Now people know that you're not supposed to smoke here. These are public space. There are smoking zones, and people have generally complied. Obviously, there are other issues. There are other regulations that people haven't complied well. So if cigarette manufacturer sell, removing them from normal shelves and putting them in a hidden place, managing who can buy and who can't buy, where it's smoked has happened. I think if you want to enforce it, you will enforce it, because African countries are very good at enforcing things they don't like, and especially African governments. And I believe that can be enforced. Just coming back to what Velma was saying, I know Ken Okot personally, and I knew the fight he was having. But you know, and coming back to my point is, this was a lone ranger. The reason why, you know, sadly when he passed on, the bill passed on with him, is because none of his colleagues picked it up. None of his colleagues, even though Ken was a very popular MP, loved by most people, and sadly we lost him at the age we lost him, but there was very little uptake of that, you know, fight that he was pursuing. It looked more of a lone ranger move, and Parliament, you know, poured cold water on that and moved on to other things. So yes, you can't regulate if you want to, and it's possible to regulate the consumption. It just needs proper laws, as Buddha has said, and understanding, you know, the effects. Until we understand the proper effects, you know, the research and all that, I do not think that, you know, the Kenyan government or other government in Africa will be quick to, you know, legalize, or, you know, maybe decriminalize, possible, legalize, you know, and allow it for, you know, use freely, maybe not until we have the proper research and all that.
All right, thank you so much, Makanda. I do know that, and like you've mentioned, there is the possibility that systems can be put in place to make sure that there is proper regulation. But before I even throw a question to the rest of the panelists and also open it up further to the listeners, Makanda, I think one thing I'd like to hear from you, when we talk about regulation, which offices would really be looking into this? Because I tend to think usually in systems, just as we see in governance, there's usually corruption, there's usually underdealings. So all these small, you know, you would call them loopholes. What offices, well, whether in government or institutions, would be key to ensuring that some of these loopholes are covered, Makanda, in your view?
I think the first thing will be to ensure that you know, the proper research agencies in Kenya, the medical research agencies, have done a proper research, and that to me looks like the Ministry of Health, because, you know, the proponents talk about the health benefits, and if that will be a good starting point, because obviously anything to do with health, there are crops that are still really outlawed, but they are still used. You know, opium, morphine, and all this, they are all, you know, used for medical reasons. And so it is possible to start from the health ministry. And then, of course, going out, you know, it means, you know, the general government agencies that deal with enforcement, you know, the police, the public prosecution, the attorney general. But I think the conversation around legalization of marijuana, especially in Africa, will have to start from the ministries of health, the respective ministry of health, because those are the custodians of issues of public health, and together with the agencies like the Pharmacies and Poison Board in Kenya. There could be other similar names across Africa for the agencies that license drugs, license substances, license medical equipment. So that coordination would have to sit in the Ministry of Health. And once you decriminalize it or legalize it, maybe you do not need the DPP, but you need to enforce consumption, who's consuming, who's planting. So the normal agencies that do the enforcement.
All right, thank you. Velma, go ahead.
Yes, it would be difficult to start setting up anything and start talking about we need to know the research without actually setting up a bill that allows these bodies don't even have permission to look into it. And that's why the bill was important, setting up the regulatory council, and then the regulatory council would be chaired and would consist of all these bodies that Makanda has mentioned, as I listed. And then that would then be the genesis of even talking about what kind of plant do we want to have in the market, what are the adverse effects. That's where that council is the one that would be the foundation of all these things that we're talking about around regulation. So, and by the way, it didn't exactly die. Honorable Kiarie, John, did somewhat pick it up, but I think he again sensed that he wasn't as committed as the late Honorable Okoth Kenneth in being a lone ranger, as you say. And I agree, he was a lone ranger to a certain extent. He did do a media tour talking about it, but that was about it. And then he reached out to us, and we're now starting to ask him, do you want us to then form an interest group that can then, but we never really got to that point. And even as we were talking, I didn't even know he was unwell. He was quite a jovial fellow, so I didn't know that it was an urgent matter. If I had known, and if he had expressed it to me as such, I think we would have then formed a kind of a team to start pushing for it and having an angle to push for it. It's unfortunate it went the way it went, but then we can still look to somewhat to Honorable Kiarie, we call him KJ, to pick up where Okoth left off.
Yeah, we've been engaging a lot of senators and a few legislators in Kenya, and people of course are very ready to engage. And as you know, our nation is going to an election this year, so we've had a lot of engagements. If you look at there's an MP called Mr. I think he's called Mr. Mwanzo or whatever. He's the head of the security. So he passed a bill. He tried to pass a bill in Parliament where they needed to change cannabis into two sections, where there's, the type of cannabis that can end up in the wrong hands, and the type of cannabis that's actually good for the country and can be used for research, can be used for medicine, and all these different things. And so what we need to do as the authorities and some of the people that are working in this space is to continue to engage with these people, and to engage with legislators, and to engage with research bodies and CARI and all these different bodies, such as the university at the Jomo Kenyatta University. They have a great research department. They're ready to listen. It's to continue to have a well-informed conversation, so that it's not just about legalization of cannabis, but it's all the high value that we have in the crop, so that people can really start to understand and be educated about this crop. So I think even now with the presidential candidate that's going around talking about legalization of cannabis, which is really good because it brings forth the conversation, but I feel like the conversation just ends at legalization of cannabis, but doesn't go into the values of the crop. And I think that's where we really need to push, so that people can understand. And even people that have never used cannabis or have never heard of cannabis get to understand the uses and the high level purposes of this crop. Yes.
Buddha Blaze, I know you've been very key as far as pushing for the legalization in Kenya is concerned. But I'm interested to understand what's the situation like in Kenya in terms of the use of cannabis.
It's quite widespread. I mean, in all circles, it's everywhere. So, I mean, I think it's a conversation that has reached a time that it needs to be had, but it needs to be had on a high level, intellectual level, where people are really understanding that it's not just about smoking and partying, and it's really, really a magical crop, So I think we need to reach levels where people are having legal conversations, medicinal conversations, talking to doctors. Like I like what Claire said about bodies that really, really can put forward and literature that people can understand this crop, rather than just keeping it to a level where it's just it's just bangy and leave it there. It needs to go deeper than that.
Unfortunately, also the political candidate who's brought it back to the public sphere, which is very odd to me, and I've expressed that in other spaces, being an ex-cop and a special branch, the dreaded special branch, but bringing this back bringing it to public debate in 2022, has also kind of latched onto the smoking more than the industrial purposes, and that's also dangerous, because it doesn't allow for room to discuss the value of and that is really dangerous, because it seemed, his televised appearances are when he's dancing and to reggae music, which is associated with recreational use than with medicinal use. Well, it's both, but when you think Rasta, you think reggae music. If you think of a concert, you think recreational use. You don't think medicinal use. So I think if he's serious and his platform is as serious as he wants us to consider it, he needs to amplify and elevate the discussion to the value of the plant and the various values of the plant across, the spectrum, not just recreational.
That's it, Velma. You're speaking my language. That's exactly my sentiment. I've voiced it a little bit. I've told people, yes, I am pro-cannabis legalization, but I think it needs to be bigger than we have a presidential candidate. What happens if he loses? Now people are, oh, look at him, he lost, and there's no conversation around it. I feel like even on national media, nobody's having this conversation. Nobody's coming on mainstream TV and saying, break down the values of this crop, rather than just saying legalize it. All
right, thank you, Buddha Blaze. Maria, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Leah. I just wanted to sort of throw in the question that the fact that now we are seeing one of the presidential candidates in Kenya basically advocating for the legalization of cannabis, although I've not been able to know the details of it, the question is this helpful? Is this going to move the conversation forward, you think, or is this not that helpful as you would expect?
In my view, and which is very interesting, it's arguably the first time that a presidential candidate has come with an issue that can galvanize the nation since the Constitution of Kenya 2010 debate. Should we pass it? Should we shoot it down? This is the first time we've seen a candidate who has not been repelled anywhere he has gone. He's held rallies everywhere. He's not been booed. There's a kind of a euphoria, there's something positive about the way people view him and his stance, even though they probably don't take him seriously. There's a very high likelihood that they don't take him seriously. But it's the first time I'm seeing an issue, something becoming an election issue, being viewed so positively and not divisively. And it's also the first time in an election where we haven't had tribalism stick out as strongly, because there's this other thing that's also galvanizing us in the middle somewhere there. So it's a very odd election. I don't know if any other Kenyan on this space feels the way I do, but this is a very strange campaign period.
I would like to look at it from another angle, that probably Honorable Wajakoya, if I am allowed to call him so, has brought in this topic that has been frowned at for the longest. And we have so many young people who are so excited and interested, because like we've just been discussing, this is something that has been criminalized in our country for the longest, yet it's very rampant. We have so many people today, especially young people, using marijuana. I'm an addiction counselor, and most of the clients we get to see actually have issues with cannabis use, trying to get out of the same and all. So this excitement of finally somebody spoke up about this in public. So the young people are all hyped about it, but then I think we must stop to consider, what does the older generation think about? There is all these myths they know and have heard about marijuana use, all those misconceptions that they've had about marijuana use, and can we be able to change their perspective of the same? Like we've rightly put it ahead before, that for us to get to that point where we can legalize this stuff, we have to start from a point of awareness, insight, knowledge, informed, or rather information about it, so that we can be able to see whether can it be legalized or not. So Wajakoya now might sound popular because I think young people are very hyped about him. They're excited, they're interested to hear this. But then what about the older generation who will not be in the social media spaces and speaking about it? My thoughts.
Yes, I think young people are feeling seen and heard to a certain extent.
Thank you, Velma. I just want to hear from some of the listeners we have here. I know Nyambuti is here. Nyambuti, go ahead. We'd like to hear from you. Nyambuti, are you there?
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I didn't have much to say. I think there's something that people are not focusing on well, and it's the word legalization. I mean, it doesn't really specify an alternative. I mean, if you come to think of it, what are we legalizing? People are not talking about what we are trying to legalize here. I mean, home growing is also legalizing. You can legalize home growing. So is allowing a free market whereby joints are being sold out like groundnuts everywhere. And it's not that if one is for a certain type of legalization, it's automatically that they will be pro for the other type of legalization. I mean, it doesn't work like that. I mean, I might like that it's being sold, but other people might not like that I'm growing it in my backyard. That might create some kind of conflict or so. So, and then there's prohibition. If we're legalizing and we're prohibiting certain things, I mean, there's a conflict with that. And I think people should look at first instead of just hyping around. I'm aware that so many youths are happy about it, that it's a topic that is being brought up in spaces and people are talking about it in public spaces, but not so much people understand what legalization is about. At the end of the day, it might be legalized and people might still be frowning. Oh, so I'm not allowed to grow. I mean, it'll be crazy out there. And that's just what I was thinking about.
So are you saying you don't think it should be legalized?
I think it should, but certain things need to be looked at first. We should be told what's being legalized. I mean, what is it they're legalizing? That's what they're not clear on. We're not really clear on what we're trying to legalize here. They might be legalizing industrial hemp alone, and maybe not allowing. I mean, look at Zimbabwe. They're not allowing the natives to plant it, but they're allowing companies to. They've legalized the plant, but the natives are not allowed to either use or grow the plant. It's crazy. They're only giving licenses to companies that are foreign companies or investors. I mean, I personally, not to vindict myself, but I asked an oncologist in Nairobi, would your cancer patients, if I had to help them with their pain and their insomnia issues, would you allow it for free? Because I have the plant, would you allow it? And he was like, what are you trying to do? This is an illegal this is an illegal thing you're trying to introduce to my patients. They were like, no. So that's it. It's just confusing. It's not a straightforward thing. Legalizing is not a straightforward thing.
Thank you. I want to throw a question to Makanda before I come to you, Thom, and also Mwaura and everyone else also. Makanda, when you hear what he's talking about in terms of legalization, that it's not clear, what are we legalizing? And when we talk about legalization, what are we even talking about really, Makanda?
Yeah, I get what he's talking about, and obviously laws then come into place. Everything in Kenya that is legalized, including even just fuel for your car. There are even laws on how you can pick fuel from the petrol station. You cannot go there with a plastic container. You can pick in a metallic can and all that. Even milk, which is supposed to be drunk by everyone, is regulated on how you can, whether you can sell it raw, or you have to pasteurize and all that. So yes, obviously, then it depends on which aspect of cannabis are we looking at? Is it industrial? Is it for health reasons? And for me, the low-lying fruit for me is for health reasons. That is normally an easier conversation to start with before you can move on to recreational and maybe industrial. But it all depends on where the legislature is convinced it has more impact and more value. And then, of course, they'll regulate then how to grow it. I mean, every crop, including coffee, sugar, tea, water, they are all regulated on who can grow and how it can be grown and how it can be sold. It all ultimately depends on what is the use, which is the easiest way to regulate its planting and growing and selling, and who can grow it. So that would depend ultimately on whether it's industrial, whether it is for health or recreational, and then the legislature will put in place regulations for that.
Yeah, are you there? Should I continue? Okay. I will continue with the next person, Tom Law.
Sorry.
It's okay. Tom Law, what are your thoughts? Tom Law 4.
Maybe Thom might need to tap on the mic in case he's not able to connect. All right, let's just move on to Mwaura as we wait for Thom to come back. Mwaura, you can share your thoughts.
Okay, Haro, you can hear me?
Yes, we can
hear you.
Yeah, asante sana. Now, before I say what I want to say, I just want to throw in a few facts that this medicinal cannabis medicinal is going now in the next some years to be around $340 billion. So you can see it's a very, very, very huge amount of money. And I was talking to somebody from Lesotho, because in Lesotho they have regularized it, but they only grow it in some place whereby those companies they are allowed to grow it and then export it, and they are paying about $300,000 upfront per 1 hectare. But they are just only growing it there and then exporting it to those companies that extract those medicinal things from these cannabis. But now, before we can talk about when legalizing these things, I think the first thing we need is to educate people that can people call it bangi, let's say that's the normal word that we use in watu wanatumia huko mtaani cannabis sativa. Before we can say how that will be legalized or not, people need first of all to be educated on its medicinal value and ABCD. Because I remember when I was in Lesotho, because I was working, I wanted to see how this company is doing those things. It was some 2 years back, something like that. I told my mom that I went to Lesotho because I want to start cultivating a bang there, this marijuana there. And she told me, if you do that, you are no longer my son. No, you can see, because that's what the kind of things that most of us and most of particularly people in rural areas and such have in their mind. So I think the very first step that we should do is to educate the people that what it is, what is value, and from there now we can move to registration of this thing. I think today, if I need to grow potatoes, let's say in Kenya, I don't need actually any license or anything. I just have to cultivate my farm and then I grow. But this is a plant that has not only value but has been misused for generations. People have been misusing it. So there is a difference. So first of all, we put a bill in parliament, like those that Ken Okoth head, saying ABCD, these are the bodies to regulate it, this is how it should be grown, this is who should grow it, this is who should buy it, in a way ABCD. If we have such a formula in place, then I think from there we can start from there. Number two, we also educate the public that the reason as to why it is being grown is because of ABCD. It has this medicinal value, it has this value, it has this value, and if people, actually farmers, can get money from growing it. But it should be in a controlled environment whereby not everybody can just be allowed to grow it anyhow, because it will be prone to being misused by people. So in my humble opinion is that we should regularize this thing. It should be regularized. And for me, I personally, I'm thinking that if it is regularized, I'll go into it. I'll go into growing it just for medicinal value, because I believe that anything God created, He says in Genesis 1 that everything was good. Everything was good. And I believe that He also created marijuana and it was good. But as we all know here that even man was created as a good being, but he violated God, and now he does what he does what he wants. So if you misuse anything, no matter how the intention of God that was that it should be good, it will turn into something else. You look at it. If you feed a lot, let's say, if you feed a lot of food with the sugar, with the what, you will suffer from diabetes. That's because you are misusing that thing. So if anything is used in the right way, in the proper way, I think it has no harm. So in my opinion, I think we should register this marijuana, this cannabis, and we have proper mechanism of who, first of all, who should grow it. Number two, who should buy it? Not everybody. If you have to grow it, you should be licensed to grow it, and there should be a body that is regulating how you grow it and who is buying it. There should be legislation on who is supposed to buy that and where is supposed to be sold. Because not that I grow and then I sell to you in my estate who start smoking it and doing some bad things. So registration for me is okay. Let's register it. But before we do that, we educate the public, and then we have registration in place on who grow it, where it's sold, who can buy it, and who can trade in it. I think if we do that, we shall be in safe hands. Thank you.
You know, I tend to think, Maura, and I love your comments and your chain of thought, but just something random. When you talk about who will grow it, you know, who will be given the mandate, or rather be legalized to grow the plant and even distribute it. And it feels like it's going to be a gold mine and perhaps a competition amongst, you know, different people who would like to take on that type of business. So I tend to ask myself, how will the governments, you know, in respective countries across Africa be able to decide, okay, this is the entity that's going to grow cannabis, and, you know, given the license to sell it, or, you know, provide it to institutions that need it, whether it's for medicinal purposes or whatever be. That's a question I'll ask later, especially to Bude Blaze. I'd like to hear that from him. But I also want to hear from Claire. Claire, I see you have something to say, and I think it's related to what Maura was saying.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just picking some bit of excitement here about legalization of the same. And I felt like it's important that we do not forget the other angle of it. And I think I had earlier stated that, so I'm just saying this for emphasis purposes, that this substance, let me call it so, recently is very potent. I think I pointed out that the THC level in marijuana, because of the recreational use, which is highly sought out, has really increased from 4% to around 12%, and that is in the last 2 decades. And there is a high chance that the ones that we have here have higher potency, especially shash, which is very, very popular. And we see this being abused very much with young people. So maybe we need to be a bit wary. We need to ask ourselves, what would we be getting our young people into in case we take that direction too hastily? There is a lot that needs to be put in place. Too much needs to be put before we get there. We need to regulate foremost, what are we planting, because not all, there is so many variants of the same, more than 100 phytocannabinoids.
I feel you, Claire. Claire, I understand where you're coming from. Sorry, I'm just taking on because I was the next speaker. I can tell you, like in countries like the Netherlands, which is one country that obviously they legalize early, so it's good to look at best practice. A country like Netherlands, for example, cannabis is not legal; it's tolerated. You understand? So it's not like, oh, you can just go smoking anywhere. But what they've done is they've put it in dispensaries, in cafes. You can only smoke in certain places. They've tolerated for older people. If you're an adult who knows what you're doing with your life, you can go. But obviously, kept away from young people. You're not allowed to sell to anybody that's a minor. And number two, not everybody can sell it. It's kept in dispensaries. There's certain people that have the licenses to sell it. Certain people that have the licenses, and the licenses are very expensive. Just like even recently, New York just legalized, but it's certain areas and it's certain people that are allowed to get those licenses. There's certain policies that they have to pass. There's certain things that they have to go through. There can be people that have a criminal past. There can be people that have dubious intentions. There are people that want to either engage in this particular trade, but with a certain expectation from the government. Like you said, I think we're all in agreement here. There's certain things that need to be done, that just so you're not walking into the legalization conversation blindly. There's certain parameters that need to be met. How do we keep this thing away from children? How do we keep this crop away from people that don't need to be using it? You can tell. I hear so many people say, young people have been abusing this. But if you really take care of the crop and you give people the right amounts of dosages and the right amount, and actually the right seeds and the right seeds for the farmers to cultivate, you won't have a bad crop. The reason why you're having so many situations where people are saying cannabis leads to mental issues or whatever is because it's unregulated and people are being given the wrong crops, and they're smoking things that they don't need to be smoking. If you go to certain countries such as Canada, they actually, at the club, the government has put a table where they say, cool, let's look at your cannabis. We should look at the THC levels and tell you whether this is really good for consumption or not. Because this crop has a myriad different purposes. So you could be smoking, and I've seen people smoking leaves, and I'm like, why are you doing that? That's not what you need to be smoking, or you're not supposed to be smoking the seed. So the education level is very, very important. I feel like a lot of people are missing the education level of this conversation.
Right. Thank you.
I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to react from the audience.
Yeah, actually, I want to go to
yes,
to I can see more guests too and Bintu. So we'll just begin with Mugesu, and then we'll come back to Bintu and the others who want to make a comment. Mugesu, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for having me. And the issue I usually have with legalization is that if you look at it from a perspective of how we've handled alcohol and everything, is that alcohol is legal, but illicit brew is not. And you find that people who are consuming the illicit brew are the ones who are usually ostracized from society. So taking that perspective and applying it to our society, I think the conversation first should be on decriminalization. And in this case, it would be regarding the enforcement of being found maybe you are high or in possession of cannabis. Because it doesn't make sense, for example, if I'm caught with 10 grams of weed, I receive the most harsh judgment that I can get in the land. And also, when you punish people immensely because of consuming a certain drug, it eliminates the chances of them being helped from maybe consuming bad weed. And I'm sure most of you here listen to Kendrick Lamar, and in one of his songs he said he smoked weed that was laced. In Kenya currently, if you smoked weed that was laced, whom would you go to for help? Because people would start asking, si ulivuta bangi mbaya, so what can we do about that? You'll be thrown in jail. So I think the conversation should be majorly on decriminalization, because even if we were to legalize it, we usually have corrupt officials who will push down small scale farmers, who will in turn be pushed out of the system because only one person will profit. And we can see it in other products like milk. I won't mention who owns the milk companies, but we have seen it, and it is the small scale farmers who are suffering. So yeah, that's what I think about it.
Thank you. Let's hear from you, Bintu.
Thank you so much, Alea and Maria, for hosting this wonderful conversation. I'd like to also thank all the speakers who have contributed so brilliantly to this conversation. Thank you, Velma, for centering the conversation for us earlier by pointing to regulation as the key to opening up to so many of the questions that I think a lot of us have and will continue to have as we navigate the legalization and decriminalization space. My name is Bintu. I'm a hempreneur, Kenyan hempreneur based in Canada at the moment. I am with Kamuti Botanicals, which started in Kenya, and hoping to continue here in Canada. I've heard all the concerns, and I'm witnessing some of those concerns over here. Especially the mental health concerns as pointed out by Claire. As somebody who's worked on the front lines before, one of the things that I can say we observed was that a lot of the times that when people came in with cannabis-related issues, they were also more prone to schizophrenia and bipolar and mental health of that nature. I think we should also explore how regulating legalization could potentially be the answer to solving other addictions that may exist in our society. Alcoholism, heroin addiction, you name it. Cannabis can be the answer. And as well put earlier, it starts at regulation. And as Buddha Blaze also emphasized, the research is important. I loved how one of the contributors to the conversation, Mwaura, asked so emphatically, who will grow it? That's another key piece to the conversation as well, because that also makes us question as well, what would those seeds look like? Are they going to be indigenous seeds of Kenya, or are they going to be an industrialized version of trying to meet the demands of Canada or Europe, America, you name it, right? Or are we going to have some type of hybrid legislation that allows for people to choose which type of seeds they would like to grow, be it indigenous seeds, and not just for industrial purposes, but we cannot ignore the global industrialization of hemp, cannabis, marijuana, and it all comes back to regulation. We need this legalized so that we can speak more deeply about the research. We can speak more deeply about everything else. And then on the question of capacity, do we have the capacity? Absolutely, we have the capacity. The capacity is online. The capacity is in the institutions there in Kenya. We have a pipeline of graduates from STEM-related fields, to legal, to engineering, to agribusiness, you name it. The capacity is there. They're waiting for the opportunity. And that's what I believe, what has already been shared over here, that it starts with regulation. And so, yes, my contribution is thank you. And Asanteni, let us continue this conversation.
Thanks, Bintu. I just wanted to get a quick clarification. You said you're a hemp entrepreneur. Did I hear you right?
That's correct.
So it means that you actually are a small scale or a large scale farmer or cultivator of hemp? Cannabis?
Small scale,
Okay.
Yes.
And it's cannabis that you're actually growing, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, that's really good. I'm just so pleased that you joined the conversation because, as you pointed out, in some countries it's actually legal. And, it's a form of business as well. Maura, I see your hand is up. So I didn't actually take you out of the conversation because I felt like you really want to say something.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Yeah, there's something I wanted to say. Somebody, I think it was Ray Angari, who asked me, how will we determine who is to grow this marijuana or something? I want to make it very clear that I'm not for growing it for people to smoke the same way, like you see, like in Horad, whereby there are some bars whereby people can smoke it. I'm not for that. Mine is just you grow. We recognize people who are going to grow it only for medicinal value and to be exported to the global market. And how can we do that? Let's say we have a registration in place that says that before we can allow this to grow 5 hectares or 10 hectares of this thing, you have to prove that who are your buyers, where are they registered? And then we have a registration that is going to confirm that. Let's say, for example, I grow, let's say, 5 acres of marijuana. I have to satisfy the government or the relevant authority that will be in that bill that will be there in the constitution that I'm selling this my 5 hectares of cannabis to this and this institution, and it is registered here, let's say in the US for medicinal things. And after taking it, they have already paid me or they are going to pay me, and the government has to follow all through to see that I've grown it, the whole amount of this cannabis I've exported there, and have to look all that value chain to see that it has started in America, where that I'm going to sell to that company there. So for growing for the purpose of people smoking, let's say in country like my country, Tanzania or Kenya, no, I'm not for that. I'm only for growing this cannabis only for medicinal value, period. Not that whereby people will go in a club and smoke it. No, I'm not for that. And for who can grow it, I've just explained it. In this video, you should say, okay, before we issue you a permit to grow it, you must show to prove to us who are your buyers. And there must be a board to make sure that buyer, if he's based in abroad or he has a factory in Nairobi, he's going to buy that thing, and he's licensed to extract the medicinal value from that cannabis. I hope I've answered your question, Ray and Gary.
Completely answers my question, Maura. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see Teddy there wants to say something. Teddy, go ahead. Teddy, are you there?
Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on.
Can you move your sorry Teddy? Can you move your mic closer? You sound very muffled.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. What I wanted to add on, basically, I'm I actually do agree with what Buddha Blaise said, because if we do not also decriminalize it and have probably like coffee stores, places where we can go and smoke the cannabis, because it has medicinal value, and even for the recreational end, you know, like basically speaking, I'm a creative, you know, I'm an artist, and most of the time when I have a mind block, I will light up a joint and smoke, and it actually opens my third eye. Then when it comes to medicinal value, my father suffered a stroke in 2017. He got his first stroke in 2017, was hospitalized. We took him to Machakos level 5. I come from Kenya, Ukambani. We took him to Machakos level 5. At the same time, when the stroke hit him, it came with Alzheimer's. So all of a sudden, things became a little bit difficult for the whole family because he retrogressed. He became like a child. All medications were tried beforehand, and nothing was working. And basically, my father is also a herbalist, was a herbalist certified by the government before he fell sick. So alternative medicine has been in the family like forever. I actually approached my mother and told her, you guys know I've smoked cannabis for the longest, since I was 18, you know, and we're in a problem, we're in a quagmire right now. Would you guys be willing to try CBD oil? And that's what my father has been on. And his Alzheimer's seems to have retrogressed. He's basically, we've managed to wipe out the bad proteins from what blocks the brain when you go through Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and stuff like that. So I think it has value on both ends, you know, as a recreational hub, because firstly, where does it come from? It came from God. There's no additional. If it's not the modified ones, I think it should be just legalized, you know. Once it's legalized, not a lot of people, basically when something is illegal, a lot of people tend to abuse it, you know. That's my point of view on this.
Thank you.
Can I quickly just
Teddy.
ask a question? A quick question to Teddy about it. And I've been seeing also a lot of tweets coming in.
Yes.
Whereby people have said that they see this as it is a plant from God.
Yes.
They see it as a spiritual plant. Is this something related to the Rastafarian sort of religion, or is it African, or where does this come from?
Well,
for you personally, or yeah.
Basically, if you ask me, this is a plant that was put on this planet by God, you know. Biblically, everything, when you look at the book of Solomon, you know, where the wisdom comes from, the first plant, wherever the plant was discovered, you know, the medicinal value it has. It cures about 650 something diseases. Which other plant on this planet Earth do you know that cures all those amount of diseases, you know? If you look at it, glaucoma, you know, I don't have eye problems. I'm 48 years old as we speak. My eye vision is still 20/20. People in my family have eye problems, you know. I don't have, you know. When it comes to recreation, when I smoke my cannabis, I'm either going to be writing music, I'm going to be dancing, or I'm going to be prayerful, you know. The only things it leads me to do. When you hear of people have gone and done other things like gotten into crime because of cannabis, that's just an escape, you know. They use alcohol. Alcohol will make you do crazy things, you know. With cannabis, it gives you a chill, you know. We have two strains. We have basically we have sativa and we have indica, you know. One is for chill and one is for inducing sleep, you know.
Thank you, Teddy. I really want to hear from Claire.
Yes, I'm itching to say something, because if we take that direction, I'm afraid that we will land so many young people into trouble. First, I think someone pointed out earlier on the importance of research. So when we talk about it curing all those diseases that his spoken about, do we have research? Do we have evidence for the same? Secondly, today, marijuana use in our country is so prevalent among young people. And I pointed out earlier on that research has indicated that an earlier onset of marijuana use is very, very harmful